Well, I'm very happy to say I'm back here today with Andre Scheepers, a man with an endless supply of fascinating stories. And although we've talked at some length, there's a lot we haven't covered. And so I today want to pick up the pieces. So welcome, Andre.
Thanks, Hannes.
Andre, I want to go back in time a bit, back to 76. And I want you to tell us about Operation Marden. The background to this was, it really came in the wake of the Kissinger Accords, where Ian Smith agreed to majority rule in September 1976. I think that agreement was reached. And it was a watershed moment in the country's history. But as we both know, that agreement unraveled for a number of reasons. And the next thing, the British were back in the driving seat, and they put together a conference to be held in Geneva, which was chaired by a gentleman by the name of Ivor Richard. And this was really the beginning of the Patriotic Front, when a alliance was cobbled together between Robert Mugabe and Joshua Nkomo, and they formed what became known as the Patriotic Front for the purposes of negotiating at Geneva. With this happening, the military wanted to give the politicians as much leverage as possible, and that's why Operation Marden was launched. It was really a show of force to try and strengthen Ian Smith's negotiating position at Geneva. But I want you to take us through what you remember of this particular operation.
Okay, Hannes. I think you well said it was really just a show of force. I don't think tactically we accomplished much, militarily, but it was like a political statement to the world that, we're here. But okay, Hannes, Operation Marden, in my notes, I will be following my notes, Hannes, so I don't waffle. Yeah. That was in December 1976. So we launched into Tet province, deep into Mozambique, and we entered into Mozambique through Mukumbura. There were about, if I can remember, 80 vehicles, armored vehicles, mounted with medium machine guns, 20 mils, 14.5, 12.7. And I think we must have driven about 150 to 200 kilometers into the Tet province. We had initially, in crossing into Mozambique, we had artillery support, the 25-pounders, and also Grey Scouts. They helped us by ferrying a lot of the mortars and the munition on horseback across the boundary. If I can remember right, one person on crossing stood on a landmine and his foot was blown off. Also, Trooper Lottering was killed there. The whole journey, the whole episode was questioned a bit, Hannes, because there weren't many kills. There weren't many terrorists because, well, they obviously had advance warning of us coming, and so they all ran back to Tet. But I believe, listening to the CO, that was Brian Robertson speaking, that we had done a lot of logistical damage to the terrorist supply line. So in that sense, it served a good purpose. But I think, Hannes, from a military point of view, that wasn't the best way to go about it, because the terrorists wouldn't attack an armed convoy, with big guns on, because they knew they wouldn't win. And that wasn't in line with their strategy of guerrilla warfare. So perhaps, I've thought about that. It was a long, tedious journey there and back. But I would have preferred if we had perhaps done an internal para deployment way deep into Mozambique, and then worked our way back offensively towards Rhodesia. But you know, that's what happened, and yes, but there weren't many kills there, Hannes.
Andre, let's just talk a little bit about the ops that you did in 76 in the southeast Lowveld, around Bengala Dam. I know you were inside Rhodesia and going across into Mozambique. Just any of your recollections about that period?
Hannes, yes, I remember that well, because on the 22nd of December 1976, that's where Butnell and Steve, what was his name, Seward was killed, and Torty King got shot just above the eyes. So I was there. That was the 22nd. And then the next day, we deployed from Buffalo Range. And we are told that Grey Scouts had a big sighting of Turs in the Gonorrhoeazoa game reserve. And so we deployed by chopper. I was under Graham Wilson's command. He did a splendid job there. I remember that. I was next to him as we were advancing this long extended line. The terrorists couldn't really, Hannes, put up a fight effectively because the vegetation was pretty sparse, and they just couldn't match our shooting qualities. I remember we didn't miss Hannes. We were all marksmen, 2-inch groupings, and so they tended to fire on semi-automatic, you know, and sort of the muzzle would go up of the rifle and go over our heads, generally speaking. But they couldn't get away. It was a bit of a slaughter there because we killed 40 as we were sweeping through. And so what they try to do there, Hannes, interestingly, they try to hide in hollow tree trunks, a lot of them, because a lot of the wood there, the trees had fallen over from the drought and hollow inside, and they'd hide in there. And there were these low bushes, and they'd hide in these bushes. But we found them all. And we actually shot a lot of them straight through the tree trunks, because an FM, you know, could go through a tree. Just an observation. I'll remember that up because I shot one of the main commanders there. He was the chief medic, and he was running to my front, across my front, and I shot him, and I opened his medic's pack, and in the medic's pack was a brand new Tokarev, still in Greece. And so I earned that Tokarev, and I had that for many, many years. I gave it to my dad. But they didn't stand a chance there, Hannes. They didn't have enough time to get away, you know what I mean? So they were literally just gunned down. Yeah, there were 40, we had 40 casualties. We killed 40 terrorists there.
Andre, it was a busy time for you, end of 76, because it wasn't long after that there was a horrific massacre in the Hondi Valley, where I think over 30 workers on the tea estates were massacred by a Zanla gang. And there was then a reaction called for, and you were involved in that reaction, which was the attack on the small garrison at Mavondi across the border in Mozambique. Just talk us through that particular op.
Okay, Hannes, I remember that op in particular. I also remember that massacre. They killed like 30 farm workers there, remember, at those tea estates. Mm-hmm. And so we were sort of responding to that by way of retaliation. But that was on the 28th of December, 1976. I remember we flew in. It was a very low jump. We jumped very low, below 500 feet. It was like a vertical envelopment. once again, I was under the command of Graham Wilson. And Mavondi was just like a little, I don't know, a little Portuguese town right there on the border inside of Mozambique. But why I remember that operation in particular was, Hannes, that's where I, for the first time, became a lance corporal. And so that was like a special status to me and a big deal, you see. But yes, I was Lance Corporal Scheepers, and of course I had my own stick, and I was alongside Graham Wilson doing all the clearing. But with regards to the actual fighting itself, Hannes, if I remember right, I could be wrong, but I think that this is correct. We killed 44 CTs there, 44. Most of the TERs got away. Because of the buildings that we had to clear. It was quite a slow, tedious process. We had to go down the street, building by building. And so they managed to escape our clutches. But I also remember, speaking for myself, on the sides were very thick bush. And there's quite a bit of collateral damage done there because we had seen movement in the bush. And we just assumed those were the terrorists who were hiding. But often it was civilians hiding in the bush, and some of them got killed as well. So that was, not a good thing, but we couldn't help that because we weren't prepared to go into the bush ourselves. Because if there were TERs, they would have shot us on entry. So that's what happened there. But overall, it was, quite a good operation. Yes, we managed to kill 44 terrorists there, yes.
Andre, just changing the subject slightly, I just want you to talk a little bit about your time on those long-range reconnaissance operations, finding the target at night, flying in the Dakotas with the old, these wonderful reserve pilots, one of whom was Professor Christie, who was actually the dean in the Faculty of Law at the University of Rhodesia. He was extremely bright guy, and it's just quite incredible, that this guys like that were rustled out of their beds at night and told to fly these long-range missions at night into Mozambique. And I know that the biggest challenge was always finding your target. And I just want you to talk us through how you did this and how you interacted with the pilots to get to the right spots.
Okay, Hannes. Okay, I'm with you. Look, Hannes, I was quite involved in map reading, navigation, pathfinding. I had to be to basically look for the camps. But concerning these jumps, they were called HALO, high altitude, low opening. I did a couple. We would jump from 20,000 feet, Hannes. Now that's pretty high, Hannes, because you could see a slight curvature of the earth. That's how high we were jumping. We all used oxygen at that altitude. And if I can remember right, Hannes, it's 50 years ago, but you would free fall for 90 seconds. So that's a long time to be in the sky. You almost had time for a cup of tea, you see. So you would be falling down. But you mustn't forget that I also had lots of liberty in that I could track kilometers across the sky. So as I was coming down, not only did I look for features in the aeroplane, but as I was coming down, I was also looking for landmarks because I could go where I wanted to go. And wherever I went, the men followed me. You see, so we could cover many kilometers in the sky to get overhead your target. But Hannes, just a bit on that, because that was rather a special kind of operation. I would generally jump between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. I like to jump then because of the element of surprise, but also because it gave me time in the early hours of the morning to dispose all my equipment. Because if you didn't hide that and you're looking for a camp, that would lead to a compromise very quickly if someone found all your equipment. We would generally leave New Serum. Now, the pilots were very good, Hannes, cooperative, friendly, you know what I mean? And whatever I requested, they helped me. They weren't funny at all, which just made my task so much easier because we were under quite a bit of stress, Hannes, you know what I mean, on these ops. But we'd leave New Serum. That's where I deploy from on both occasions at about 11, or at least before midnight at night, 11 in the evening. Because of the long distances we had to travel into to Zambia. But what I remember about those flights, Hannes, it's hard to imagine this, but it was freezing cold up there. You know, Hannes, remember the deck doors open all the way. And if you stood there by the door and you breathed, then out of your mouth would come these icicles, little pieces of ice. That's how cold it was up there. So it was freezing cold. And what I would do, this is the way I worked, Hannes. I don't know how other men did Halo, but the way I did it, Hannes, and it worked for me because I found the camps. I would stand in the cockpit. So all the men would be seated in the plane, fully kitted up, with oxygen. And I would stand behind the two pilots there, behind their chairs. You see their seats. And I had like a 180-degree view through the deck windows. And I could navigate. And Hannes, I was reasonably good at doing that because I knew what I was looking for. I was mainly looking for features, main features to tell me where I am in relation to where I thought the camp was. So I would look at main roads, dirt roads from 20,000 feet. They look like silver ribbons, little ribbons. And also Lakes, Kaborabassa was a main feature for me. I knew when we passed over that, and I could estimate we're about 80 kilometers past that. I used the train, you know, that mountain range, because mountains also had something very conspicuous about them. The top of the mountain, if it was moonlight, was lighter than the base. The base was always darker, so you could see the layout of the mountain range. And so, if you saw lights for a town, there weren't many lights there that you could see at that height. But that's basically what I used. It was aerial map reading, really, at a tremendous advantage because you know, I could look down from a very high position. So that's how I worked there, Hannes. But in the cockpit, minimal really conversation. The pilots were always very good to me. I explained to them, once again, this is how I did it. When I felt we were coming towards the area where I wanted to jump, because back at headquarters, I was sort of given a 50 square kilometer area where we presumed, you know, the enemy would be. It was quite a big area to find the camp in. But I'd tell the pilot that, look, he must just keep on flying straight. He mustn't deviate. It must be normal, nothing unusual. It's like pretend he's just an airplane flying over somewhere, you see. I'd run back, stand in the door. The big box was there because we had a box. I'd tell them in quickly to get ready. And I'd kick the box out. Now, the box had a red light, you see. All our equipment, well over $20,000 worth of equipment, night optical devices, everything. And then I would jump out straight after that. I had a green light above my helmet. So I would follow the red light. The rest of the men, it was, it was literally shoulder to shoulder, you know what I mean? We were right next to each other. They would jump out straight after me. And they would follow the green light, and off we would go. And yes, that was the procedure. But it was more just the long wait, Hannes. We waited for hours before we could jump, and it was just quite telling on the nerves. You know what I mean? Because you didn't know what was down there. But I did say to the pilot generally, keep going, maintain your direction, and we're going out. And like I said, the lights were quite important because I could follow the red light. The one jump, we lost the box altogether because the parachute didn't open. But generally, that helped the men follow me as to where I was going. And like I said, I could track for several kilometers in the sky at 20,000 feet to have a look at different features. And that's what I did there, yes.
Interesting, Andre. Andre, I want you to just talk to us, just explain the process on getting your commission into the SAS. You were an officer, but on your return, you weren't commissioned straight into the squadron. You had to go on a live firing sort of exercise, which was run by Daryl Watt in the Roomway, which then was very, very heavily infiltrated by Zipra. So you were in a very hostile neighborhood, I know that. But just talk us through that process on your way to actually being commissioned into the SAS.
Okay, Hannes, I was at quite an advantage. Remember, you had different kinds of officers courses. You had the TAs doing their 4-month officers course. You had the POC course where senior NCOs would go in and do that course to get their commission. But I did the regular cadet course. That was 13 months. And that stood me in good position, so I'm told, for future promotion. You know what I mean? The regular officers, because we were like the career officers, you know, if you want to use that word. But SAS selection, as far as officers were concerned, was very strenuous. And remember, I told you I'd done the selection already in Yango with Rob Johnson. We did an all-in, which was very hard with all the senior NCOs trying to find us and catch us and extract information from us. A lot of people failed that. But there was a third selection for officers, and that was Daryl was the assessing officer. He took us into the Roomway TTL, and there we actually had live practice. You know what I mean? That was the real thing. Now, that was a very difficult area to operate in, Hannes, because let me just tell you before I speak about the selection itself, because the selection lasted 10 days. 10 days with Daryl, you can imagine. And, you know, he would walk, 20, 30 Ks a day. So it was pretty hard. But the Roomway TTL was known as a liberated area by the TERS. In other words, they controlled the military activity of the area, not us. With the help of all the local supporters. And so they had all these people called Majibas, and the Majibas served Zipra's intelligence network. They were the eyes and the ears for Zipra. And if they saw any unusual movement, they would investigate or they would report back to Zipra because they had their contacts, they had their network. It was very secure. And because they were so effective in reporting back our position to Zipra, that prevented us, Hannes, from walking during the day. Totally, we could not walk during the day because these Majibas, generally, most of them were young mothers, with food on their back and then their head, but they were herdsmen, hunters, hunting rabbits with their dogs, and some young farmers. But they would pick up any unusual activity. So it was very hard, actually, to be successful in the Roomway. These external ops were, in a sense, much easier, less stressful than working in the Roomway and in the Gonerizoa area as well. But if I can, Hannes, I'll just explain to you what happened there, because after that selection, so it lasted 10 days, Hannes, we came back on the 14th of November. Now, what's important to remember there, Hannes, because this caused a bit of controversy, we deployed into the Roomway after the first Viscount was downed on the 3rd of September 1998. Now, that Viscount was Viscount Hunyani, remember, RH825, in which 48 civilians died there, you see. So we went into Roomway after that. And then on the 24th of November, we now returned from our selection course under Daryl's leadership, because he was the one assessing us. There are quite a few people there. There's Joe Deploy, there's Rich Stannard, Slingsby. He was an officer, but he was our signaller. There's myself. And it was a very busy time because Daryl would really know where to go to find the tours. He had quite an intuition to find where he thought the enemy were, and often he was right. But on the 24th of November, after this very strenuous exercise, we were busy returning to Salisbury, and we stopped at Karoi for a beer. And there we met Keith Nell. Now, I know there's controversy about Keith Nell, but it was Keith Nell. We all know that. And 1 minute he is a corporal, and then I think he's a captain, you know, with the what did they call them? The security. Yes, that's right. He called Daryl aside and he briefed Daryl as to what had happened, because he had the Kraal headman there who said the Strela gang is in his village. They were molesting his daughters, you see, and he had two very senior, reliable, what do we call them? The SFA were present, and so they vouched. And so Daryl listened carefully. He said, "No, this sounds, this sounds feasible. We need to go." He phoned Garth Barrett and said, "Can we go?" Garth Barrett gave him the permission, and then that night we set off to this kraal. Now, Hannes, we walked about 25 kilometers that night. Now, that was very strenuous with our pack, Hannes, but we legged it, and we arrived at the kraal about 4 o'clock that morning. You see, the headman, the kraal chief, he took us in, and once we got there, Daryl then sent me forward to do a recce. It took me nearly an hour to do that reconnaissance because there were 8 huts, and I had to make sure, you know, what was going on around and in these huts. But as I was snooping around, I saw one AK leaning upright against the doorpost of one hut. So obviously he's inside there having an affair with one of the chief's daughters, you see. And so I was still snooping around. I was pretty good at snooping around, Hannes, a bit of a sly character. And next minute, the one terrorist came out the front door of the hut, straight towards me. So I quickly went down to ground, and he stopped right in front of me, about 12 inches, 1 foot, honestly. And he urinated in front of me. So his urine, splashed into my face. But I didn't move, Hannes. I just lay there still. I thought his turn's coming, you see. And I let him go back. And then we waited for first light. And Daryl put me in charge of the assault, of the attack. I positioned the men. I gave them the arcs of fire because I knew quite a bit. I'd gone around all the huts. You see the 8 huts. And Daryl went to the right flank in case someone tried to gap it out that side. But when we initiated contact, when it got lighter, they came running out. Some of them skirmished towards us to attack us, you see. But they didn't stand a chance, Hannes. Some of them were trying to dodge us, and we killed them all. And there were no survivors there. So that's what happened there. But if I may just mention this, Hannes, people forget this, that when we did an attack or an assault, we were all marksmen. We all had 2-inch groupings. And generally, it was pretty hard to get away from anyone in SAS because, we were pretty good shotters. And the tours weren't like that because, they would spray random on automatic rifle. But that's how it went. And, of course, in war, the name of the game is shooting. If you're the best shot, you win the battle. And that's what happened there. Anyway, after that op, we moved away from the kraal because we were afraid of a counterattack because there were a lot of Majiba and a lot of activity in the surrounding area. It wasn't just that chief's kraal. And Daryl got me. I personally did this, Highness. I collected the bodies, laid them up like that, in a line. I got heavy documentation. I put it on the one dead chest who I thought was the leader that came out, put it on his chest. We got back to base, where was it, Karoi? The helicopters came in first and took the dead Turs and the documentation to SP for forensics. So as far as we're concerned, there's nothing more we could do, you see. Now, that happened very quickly. Then we moved off away from the kraal, and Daryl told Rob Slingsby to set up the TR-48, and he was doing that because we had to give a sit rep back to headquarters. And while he's doing that, Hannes, he was nearly killed. He actually should have been killed, because what happened on a copy close by, a Tur from behind a rock with an RPK gave him a real snot squirt. You know what I mean? Very accurate, and these bullets went all around his head, and he took cover. But the Tur was in that copy. So Daryl said to me, "Andre, flush that guy out." So we started shooting in the area, and this was quite humorous. Well, I don't know. For me, it was quite funny. This Tur with his RPK jumped up like Jack in the Box. He jumped up out of from behind the rock, and honestly, Hannes, he was still in the air, a few feet in the air, and Daryl shot him right through the chest. That's incredible shooting. You know what I mean? That's spontaneous shooting. I mean, you're a hunter, you know these things, but that's how Daryl could shoot. You see what I mean? So that put an end to that machine gunner. But after the contact, Hannes, this was just a point of interest. I'm not trying to be controversial. This is what happened, the facts. We collected the bodies. I did that with the documentation. They were all chopped out. So there was communication. Then we radioed SAS headquarters. We gave a sitrep. That's why Rob Sling put up the TR-48. And of course, the helicopters came back and they picked us up. We went on to do other ops. That was the nature. We'd just go in, kill the enemy, and move on. It was continuous, Hannes, op after op after op. And this op was a very small op as far as we were concerned. We just went in, did our job. The name of the game is shooting, and then off we went. You see, so it was a relatively very small, insignificant op. But it was significant in the sense that if those members were part of the Strela game, because we didn't find their pipe, we didn't have time, Daryl, to look around there. Then I think more should have been made about that, because still to this day, SAS, and I don't know how this came about, they deny that transmission. They deny that they got a communication from us on these two ops, in spite of the helicopters. And SP did get the intelligence about the Strela. They did get the paperwork, but something went wrong there, you know, which I can't explain. And I know people are sensitive about it, and it's quite controversial. But Keith Nell was the man. We did take them out, and there was good, ample communication, Hannes, but nothing came of that. So that's what happened there in the Roomway. And that was a well-orchestrated operation, not because I led the assault, but because it was managed by Daryl. And he's giving us young officers chance to prove ourselves in battle situation. You know, I appreciated that very much.
Yeah, Andre, still a lot of unanswered questions around the Viscounts and that particular contact, and I certainly don't have the answers. I'd very much like to know what they are, but at this point in time, still very much of a mystery. But Andre, let's just go on again. I want you to tell us about Objectory, one that you did with, I think, with Garth Barrett, near Lusaka, middle of 1979, I think it was.
Yeah, so I remember this op too, Hannes, because I didn't do many ops with Garth Barrett. Garth Barrett was the CEO of SAS. He's a very small man, quite frail in his build, but he's a very brave man. I'll give him that credit. And you know, when we arrived at the arms depot, what I liked about Garth, because I was next to him as we were assaulting going in, his determination to get into those tents to see what munitions were there so that we could blow them up. So I like that determination. You know, he was determined to go. So I really respect him for that. But yes, it was the 1st of July, 1979, Hannes. Objectory was the name. And it was on a Sunday, Hannes. So the idea was, you know, the Tiz would be sleeping in, having a rest, a rest day, because they must have partied Saturday night. But anyway, I suppose that's just pure speculation. But we did fly in, and we were told in our briefing that this would be a quick op, 3 to 4 hours. We're going in, doing our job, and we're moving straight out. Now, this arms cache was 15 kilometers west of Lusaka. And I just want to mention this as I share with you, Hannes. What fascinated me about that op was, as we're flying in, I was flying in a bell. So I was sitting at the door looking out. And I really appreciated the lush green vegetation in Zambia. The soil looked so rich and fertile, you know, agriculturally rich. So I thought, wow, what a blessed land this is, because it's like we're flying over those Kafue flats, you know, just magnificent, you see. And that's what really impressed me. But Hannes, this was a very huge arms cache. There were hundreds of tons of munition. In fact, I'm told it was the biggest arms cache in Zambia. And we went in and we just blew up the whole cache. You know, when these rockets and bullets and grenades were going off, Hannes, we had to withdraw slightly because the flames were going up to 100 meters in the sky. That's really high for fire, isn't it? You know what I mean? Because I know here in Australia, you know, these big tall gum trees set alight and they burn because of the oil, but it's never 100 meters. But that's what happened there. To reach out about 100 meters in the sky, and all kinds of explosives were going off. For example, there were 122 millimeter rockets just loosely flying around, hovering around, you see, and zigzagging all over the place loosely. And it was quite dangerous. So we had to be very watchful that, you know, you didn't get clobbered on the head with all these flying missiles. But it was a bit like Guy Fawkes. So we did that. We must have set back Zipra, you know, and their attack plans for at least a year, because we destroyed all the munition there. And as quickly as we went in, we came out again. So in terms of a successful op, you know, destroying the munitions, which was our aim, we accomplished that 100%. Yeah.
Andre, a few months later, you're back in Zambia. At this point, there's been a massive buildup in Zambia of conventional forces, and the plan was to launch a full conventional assault on Rhodesia. And Objectory was then launched near the town of Siavonga, where there was a big Zipra base. And I know you were very involved in this. Just talk us through the events involving that attack.
Okay, so I remember that op as well, because that was really my last camp attack. I was wounded there as well. But Hannes, so that happened in October 1979. Okay, it was in Zambia. And the camp, a Zipra camp, consisted of well-trained, conventionally trained soldiers. Now notice, this is the first time I don't call them terrorists. They were soldiers, Hannes, and they were brave. They put up a stellar fight. You know, I always respected my enemy or the opposition to put up a fight, because, you know, it took a lot of courage, you know, to do that. And so I don't call those men terrorists. They were really soldiers. They were there to hold their position. Now, what happened there, Hannes? So we pre-positioned, and then we flew in, and that night we were a few kilometers away from the actual camp, just getting ready to deploy early next morning. And Rob Johnson, he was the ground commander for SAS. And I remember on either side, on our flanks, were RLI. And I'll never forget that night, Hannes, because of the incredible explosions. I've never heard explosions that loud, and I've had a lot of mortars, going off around me. But what Zipra did was they mortar bombarded the area, the vicinity where they think we were in, and a lot of the mortars and the 122 mil rockets landed quite close to our position, but their explosion, especially that 122 mil rocket, was earth-shattering, Hannes. And I'll never forget that, Hannes. I can't explain to you how loud that was, but it reminded me a lot of the artillery bombardment in World War I. Imagine what those soldiers had to go through, you know what I mean? And, those bangs were so loud, the explosions, that you'd get drunk. It'll make you drunk and dizzy, and you could go mad, from just shell shock. That's how loud those explosions were. But I remember our RLI also took very heavy casualties in that operation. But what happened, Hannes, that night, I was instructed by Rob Johnson to lead SAS, the squadron, into the assault position to do the camp attack. And that was quite an honorable thing for them to get me to do that, Hannes. That's the whole squadron going in. And he wouldn't have sent me if he had no faith in me. But anyway, I like doing that kind of work. And the column of men behind me, as I led them in, were hundreds of meters long. It was the whole squadron. And so I had a big responsibility there. And I want to just explain to you what I did there, Hannes. I was going down slightly downhill. I was aware of our RLI on the other side of us, on the high ground. And I was leading in front, which I normally did, Hannes. And then I thought, what happens if I get killed? What happens now? There's going to be chaos. Or what happens if we engage in a firefight now, and I'm right in front, because I need to be back a bit to be able to control the contact, you know what I mean, the operation, because that was my work, my duty. So I put Steve Kluzniak, who I knew quite well, because he worked with me quite a bit on the Russian front, in front of me. I was second, and he set off about 10 paces in front of me. And we walked. Now, Hannes, I was quite good at navigating. My direction was pretty accurate. But Steve was veering off slightly to the left, zigzagging slightly to the left, in small little measurements. So I thought, no, we can't do this, because, Hannes, when you do a camp attack, the assault line has to be at right angles to the camp. You learn that on officers' course. Your flanks cannot be exposed. You must face the enemy head on. It must be a frontal assault. So I was worried about exposing our flanks, and all these men behind me. It was a big responsibility. So I stopped on my own steam, Hannes. I stopped the whole advance line column, and I went back to the front, and I put Steve Kluzniak back. He had done nothing wrong of any significance, but I was happy to be in front, and I set off again. And I knew it was going slightly to the left, because my shadow, on my body clock had changed slightly, you see, because that's how I worked. And I could see, no, we need to be more to the right, you see. And so off we set, and I was happy. And of course, Hannes, I'd only walked about 250 meters. It was a reasonable distance when I walked into like a hidden minefield. What the Zipra soldiers had done at the base, they had laid a minefield using POM-Zs. So they were invisible, because the POM-Zs were in the ground, and they were strung across with this fine wire, like guitar wire. You couldn't see that, you see. And you couldn't do an assault through that. And so I bumped into the first one. I heard the percussion going off, but I had no idea what it was, because I wasn't aware of me tripping anything, you see. But admittedly, I wasn't looking at the ground. You know, I'm looking up front to see where the enemy are. You know what I mean? And so this thing took me out. So I don't know if you know how POMZ works. It's quite a big grenade. It shoots out the ground to about chest height there. You see, and then it explodes. And this thing exploded in front of me. And Hannes, it lifted me off the ground as high as I am. I'm 6'3". It lifted me right up and threw me back onto the ground. And my arm was broken, this one there. And there you can see that's where the bone's broken there. And I was concussed. I had shrapnel in my leg. But that sort of rendered me useless. I couldn't carry on, you see. And Corporal Klusnek, who was about 7 paces behind me, was also wounded from that same POMZ. So if you had to ask me what was the outcome there, Hannes, well, we couldn't really do the attack. We couldn't do the assault because in front of us was a hidden minefield set up with, you know, tripwires that we couldn't see, and with POMZs. And that night, anyway, Hannes, Zipra made an orderly retreat. Remember, that's where it involved David Greenhalghs, you know what I mean? But if you had to ask me, Hannes, what's your assessment of that? Because I like to assess the ops afterwards because, you know, I always try to improve my skill, military skill. But, you know, Hannes, if I had to do that reconnaissance, I wouldn't have given the go-ahead. I wouldn't have attacked that camp that way. Why, as a guerrilla force, would we attack a conventionally trained camp? I would rather just send in the Canberras wave after wave with 1,000-pound bombs and just take it out like that. You see what I mean? And then we'd go in and afterwards and clean up the debris. But we went in, and Hannes, we didn't even know about that minefield. So our reconnaissance wasn't that good. We didn't even know about the exit route at the back because we didn't cover that, Hannes. Remember, because that's where they went out that night. So for me, I think we could have done better there, but I wouldn't have taken on that tepid camp in that way with a frontal assault. RLI lost a lot of men. I would have just rather bombed the hell out of it. And they would have withdrawn anyway, and we wouldn't have sustained any casualties there. But that's just how it went there, Hannes. Yeah. But yeah, they flew me back, the Cassavac, and that was the end of my military operation, Hannes, because after that I was grounded by Garth because of my intelligence work. So I was confined to camp, and that was the end of it. But the war came to an end anyway. Yeah, but it was it's a sad ending. And I put you in my notes, Hannes. You know, I reflect on that last op quite a bit because I was very proud to lead the whole squadron in. But you know, Hannes, all my life, and I'm not boasting, this is my conscience speaking, I always led all my men from the front. I always led by example. I never, ever withdrew or held back. And that's how my fighting ended. You know what I mean? Always putting my men first in combat. Yeah.
Well, Andre, all I can say is I think you can hold your head up high as one of the great fighting soldiers of the Rhodesian War. And I know that you were highly regarded by everybody that ever worked with you. And it's been a real pleasure to have you to talk about your past and what you remember of the war, because I do really think it's important that that these events are on the record. And I'm terribly grateful to you for all the time you've taken to speak to us.
Thank you, Hannes.
Thank you, Andre.
Okay, Hannes. You have a good day, okay?